Hey everybody, it's Wednesday. You'll notice Zelda is with me. Zelda. Yeah, there we go. We're getting Zelda in the wild. I've been trying to keep Zelda busy. You notice I'm not wearing a headset right now. I'm trying out this mic here that I found in the basement because my ears are starting to get very, very sore from too many hours in headsets. So I'm experimenting with alternatives. Um, it is still sounding very roomy, so forgive the audio quality. Still working the bugs out. But yeah, I want to talk today about something involving gaming. And in this case, it's the idea of a fantasy sandbox versus an RPG. And I've talked about this a bit before. I'm especially going to deal with player expectations and what this means and what we can take from a design perspective and a life perspective of the importance of expectations. And I'm going to focus on Baldur's Gate 3 because that's the game that made me think about this time around. And on the Discord, somebody says, there's a few videos in this. It's like, okay, I'm going to try. So let me do the help support this channel, even though I've locked. It's weird. I don't have things on my ears. Oh, my ears are so warm. I don't have things on my ears, and so I'm like, I don't know where anything is. All my orientation is off. So help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK. Or if you want to support the groups that we run through our Discord, the GoFundMe, yes. And anything that, any of these, if you give to any of these, Discord links are going to be going out in a couple weeks again. We do it on the 5th of the month, so that'll be next Tuesday. So now's a good time to sign up if you want to get an invite to the Discord. We do it this way so we can confirm that you are a real person, at least a real credit card. All right, so the first fantasy sandbox game that was called by many an RPG that I ever played was the Elder Scrolls games, especially Skyrim. Skyrim was just so big and there was so much to do and people could have the experience they wanted to have, which would have been great if I was going in expecting a fantasy sandbox. I was expecting an RPG, role-playing game. And I didn't understand why everybody loved Skyrim so much. And, well, yeah, okay, I was playing on the PS3 at the time, so no mods. But I still didn't get, like, what's so great about this game. It feels very barren and empty and not, I'm not connecting. I don't feel a great connection to my character. The fact that I'm Khajiit is practically meaningless. What the hell's going on there? And it was only when somebody said, well, it's a fantasy sandbox. I'm like, oh, okay. It's a good fantasy sandbox. It's not a great RPG on two fronts, because there's multiple meanings of RPGs. And this is where this shit gets really, really confusing. And the nomenclature of gaming terminology sucks balls. But we have to deal with it. And it can become very confusing because people will fight to the death over terminologies. And well, to me, that's not a fight I like to have. So there's the idea of, what the hell was all this crap? Oh, my other headphones. But the type of experience I like to play in a role-playing game is more playing a role. You pick a type, you play to type, you're rewarded for staying in character and playing accordingly. If you don't, you're going to have a less good experience. But RPG has more and more and more meant about loot and leveling. And now that we're getting more and more story-driven games or narrative games, that gets even more complicated. And the thing I realized I was struggling with Baldur's Gate 3 is it's trying to be something for narrative-driven players. And it's trying to be an old school, tabletop simulator RPG, complete with animated dice rolls. And then it's trying to be, with a lot of story and a lot to do, but then it's trying to have have the experience you want thing. And I think it makes all the experiences just okay. Now, full disclosure, if you want to sell a whole bunch of copies of a game and have people just go, that was all right at the end, by all means, do a catch-all design like this. But this really hooked me in terms of examining the concept when I tried to play through a second time and pick the Dark Urge little extra, one of the pre-build character things you can select in terms of story for the game is this thing called the Dark Urge, which really does feel like the default, the intended kind of canon story for the whole thing, because there's a whole bunch of characters and a whole bunch of additional experiences that you have while playing Dark Urge, that it is much more, all right, I understand why my character is this character. I understand the role I am playing. Again, I understand that this is not the only definition of role-playing game. I understand, it's leveling and loot as well. But the sheer amount of options that every scenario has to account for in these Dungeons and Dragons type video games really is a challenge, because, when D&D tried to be more computer game friendly, that was 4th edition, and holy shit, what a disaster. 5th edition D&D tries to have it so many different ways that it's cool for quick, fairly quick, get up and go. Everybody can play the type of character they want to play. It's good that if you want to do a campaign of only 4 monks, go for it. But I mean, with tabletop, that's always the reality. People can always alter and homebrew the experience, so you don't have to follow core rules. But 5th edition is very much, it's a departure from having to have fighter, rogue, mage, cleric. And I know that is the appeal, but old school role player, having those scenarios where somebody needed to be the cleric per se, or somebody needed to be the rogue, actually not only made me better at the game because I was forced to play in a different way, but it, instead of constantly camping out on my beloved wizard class with the side of ranger, I realized that rogues are really fun to play. Clerics are really fun to play. And now it's like, rogue cleric, man. I did Bard the first time through with Baldur's Gate 3. This time I'm playing Dark Urge Cleric, which is kind of funny because he's, my character's a complete freaking hypocrite. And again, roleplay. My favorite elements of Baldur's Gate 3 is how, I went into it thinking, I'm going to play it this way. It is very, very hard to just play a straight up virtuous good guys win character. So many aspects of the game railroad you into scummy decisions that my character went from this lighthearted, naive bard to, a freak who really liked inflicting pain on themselves. I did play the non-binary pronouns just to see how it went, and it was awkward. It was awkward. The journal entries, like the quest markers, it made it very, very awkward, and I was like, it was third person, so I'll have to check now that I'm playing a straight up he him, whether that's different, but some of it was first person, some of it was it was messy. But I couldn't have the experience I wanted to have like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. The game is very, very big on torture the player. You can't just win everything. Hard choices, hard choices, hard choices. And by the time I got into Baldur's Gate proper, I was exhausted. Both because there's this real sense of FOMO with the dice rolls of, the urge to save scum so that you can see what you missed. Most of the time, not much, because I'm playing through the second time and it's like, you can get around it with, with dice fails now that I know what I'm doing. But it was so different from the past Baldur's Gate games, which I love. I have the box behind Toothless back there is the box for the original Baldur's Gate game. I still have it. I still have the old Interplay box it came in. But, you could be straight up hero in old school Baldur's Gate. You could play a villain too. This plot, with its numerous twists and turns, really does not service a purely heroic role neatly. And so the sandbox elements there are unsatisfying. And yet the thing people like and the thing that's interesting in terms of discussing the game is how people got different scenes, people got different dialogue things, people got different branches, people made different choices, though I personally think, and that, again, sandbox, narrative, or role-playing game, which are we playing here? If it's have the experience the player wants to have, I would have preferred more binary good evil choices. And it's funny because the first time I played through Act 1, I'm like, everybody here is scummy. They're all disgusting. I don't really care. Oh, the goblins are torturing a baby owl bear. They die fast. It wasn't a moral choice. It was a selfish choice because the owl bear was cute and I was pissed off. And, you play goblin on an evil run. And I was like, okay, I'm going to play my Dark Urge cleric. But then playing that, it's like, this isn't an evil choice. This is kind of a stupid choice. Now, they carrot Minthara as a party member, which I guess for a certain type of player, she's one of the more conventionally attractive party members in the game. So if you want to have boobies wish fulfillment, I guess there you go, right? But other than that, I never, I was like, okay, I'm going to choose the goblin path this time. And I'm finding it very hard to do because I ended up in the Underdark in a completely different order this time, which was interesting. But I'm finding it harder and harder and harder to side with the goblins because it just is dumb. Like they're awful little creatures. It's not the stylish kind of evil that John Arenik has presented in Baldur's Gate 2. It's murderer, hobo, psycho evil. And again, okay, if you want to do that, that's awesome. But certain other elements of the game, like, that's not a run that in a party as the same person as Will, that's going to break after a while. And it's just sort of like, all right. I find myself unable to do it. And unlike Dragon Age Origins, where, yeah, that second playthrough where you pick Logain over Alistair, it's hard. But it's so satisfying. As much as it breaks your heart to lose Alistair because he's so adorable, Logain's a great character. And so the reward for sampling, it's it's a completely different second act of the game, right? Second half of the game. With Baldur's Gate 3, not so. There's sort of hard choke points. And ultimately, Halcyon or Minthara doesn't really matter much. It's not like Loghain where it opens up all these other things and there's this really compelling character and you have this experience of this person you hated is actually, a flawed guy, but you understand. You might not have made the choices he made, but he clearly loves his country. Minthara's a drow. So, hardline, evil, matriarchal, keep slaves, less nuance. And again, want to play purely evil run? Cool. But the game doesn't allow you a purely good run, so it's sort of like really disgusting murder hobo evil or kind of gray hat. You don't get that classic tabletop style D&D experience of play whatever class, be as heroic or as evil as you want. So everything's really ish, including the narrative, which is there's about 3 campaigns in this thing. Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 are almost completely different stories. It's sort of like Act 1 was this early access, almost fake out. And then Act 2 and 3 are kind of its own thing. And the villains that are kind of interesting get short shrift. And the character, I think, misses out the most. Now, again, there's a lot more Dark Urge content with Orin. But I really thought she was a cool character in the spirit of Bodhi from Baldur's Gate 2. She's evil and she's terrifying, but she's fun in her own way. I mean, it's messed up, but in a fun way. She chews scenery. Her appearances are exciting and pulls you in. But there's so much filler. And at least you get those kind of moments with her sprinkled throughout the third act. The other 2 sub-villains, Ketherick Thorne, who J.K. Simmons does a great voice, great voice work with him. And Gortash is an interesting character when he's there. But the issue is they're not there much. Ketherick Thorne is kind of there and gone. And there's just too much jockeying between, the gimmick of Act 1 and then what that comes into, which is layer upon layer upon layer of complexity. Like, that story alone could have been one game. And then you've got the 3, and then even when you defeat them all, it keeps going, and then they cap the level progress at level 12, apparently because they couldn't figure out how to make certain higher level D&D spells work in the game they made. And I thought, then if you're not going to get, if the system breaks the game, why did you make this game for this system? And then I thought, well, just strip it out. Like, just do the leveling at that point. Don't include the spells, but give us more spell slots. Because wizards are so nerfed. Again, you can't have the loot and levels RPG experience you want to have. And so the end of the game is just, please be over. Like, I was slogging through because I'm a completionist and I wanted to get as much of a sense to see if I ever warmed up to Shadowheart, if Shadowheart ever got better. And she was the only character that didn't get better. I'll do an entire video with spoilers on that another week. But even Gale, I warmed up to Gale. I liked Gale by the end. And there's some good writing with Gale. Once you know what's going on, the character is just presented poorly. He should have been uber nerd. I've talked about this before, just straight up. I love books. I talk too much. I'm a magic geek. I am in love with magic, like literal, but in the way some like autistic people love trains, Gale loves magic, right? That's what it should have been. And because there's no cool, nerdy character the way, Alistair was in Dragon Age Origins, or even Meryl being kind of psycho, or Liliana had kind of awkward moments. They were like, there was more to all of the characters in those games because, when you look at the BioWare plots, they are fairly simple. You know where you're going, and it's very much a J.R.R. Tolkien idea of the problem to solve is simple: destroy the ring, right? In Lord of the Rings. Now, all the meandering and back and forth and everything like that it takes to get there, we still know from the beginning: destroy the ring. The story ends when the ring is destroyed, right? We know what it is. Baldur's Gate 3 tried to be so many things to so many people that it suffers as a sandbox because you do feel railroaded into particular play styles. And I personally would have preferred it just be, all right, you've got this thing. It is the Dark Urge. And then I waffle back and forth because I do think it's more fun that I played it without it the first time around, and there were so many characters. Like, why is this character so prominent? They don't do anything. And then I play as the Dark Urge. Oh, that's why they're there. Oopsie. So it's sort of like Canon's second playthrough. But then you get into all this stuff and more stuff and more stuff and layer upon layer upon layer of complexity and choice and option and player freedom. And that's when it slips into Sandbox territory. But there's so much story, so very many main plot twists that you can't sandbox it. Because there's all these characters to keep track of and all these plot twists, and this guy's really this guy, and that guy's also that guy, and this person's connected to this person. It goes all the way back. Right? It's you can't sandbox it because there's so much story. And you compare that to an RPG like The Witcher 3. Witcher 1's very rough. Witcher 2... experiments that didn't quite work, in my opinion, with that very branching narrative. But Witcher 3 is one of the best action RPGs in that sort of sword and sorcery type setting that I have ever played. And they eliminated that variable because Geralt's Geralt. He has a power set. He's, a Witcher that has a particular moveset. You can't play as Yennefer. You play as Ciri in the third game, but you can't play as Yennefer. You can't play as Twitch. You're Geralt. So they limit the options there so they can go bananas on the story. And while it's open world, it's not have the experience you want to have. That game is very, very loyal to the world of The Witcher. And that's an example of a company that we're going to do a main character, hardwired. He is a particular type of person. He has particular skills. This is a world. Go nuts with the RPG combat and learning spells and making choices within the confines of this story. The most frustrating points of The Witcher for me was when all of a sudden it did something. I was like, wait, I didn't want to do that, because I was making decisions as Geralt based on this very nihilistic world that he was stuck navigating. I was role-playing. And there were a couple of points, more in The Witcher 2. The Witcher 3 was better this way. I mean, the Bloody Baron storyline was excellent. And the outcomes regarding choices, it didn't feel blind. You know, the fact that you can't romance Triss and Yennefer, they both go, fuck you. That, if you've been following along and you know anything about those characters, their rivalry and themselves as individuals, since The Witcher 3 is all the story in the background of how Triss Merigold grows a fucking spine, that makes complete sense. Unlike some of these decisions in Baldur's Gate 3, that you get the sense they are important. They're ramping it up of this is going to be very important, but you don't actually know how it's going to be important. And so you go, I'm going to make a choice. And it's more like that choice between Eorvith and Roach in The Witcher 2 of, I don't know what this choice means. I can't predict an outcome. It's going to be unsatisfying, especially since the first time around, I picked the Roach path, and it's far less good than the Eorvith path. It's rough and a little boring compared to all the cool shit you do and all the canon characters you get in the Eorvith path. But why would Geralt side against a guy? Yeah, he has kind of a rough relationship with Roach, but he knows him to go with somebody he thinks is a bloodthirsty murderer. Why would anybody make that choice to get the other option? And that's the difference between meaningful choices and choices that feel informed and fair. And I think when we talk about player choice and narrative branches, we talk about meaningful choices and consequentialist choices versus pure moral choices, but we don't talk enough about informed choices and the feeling of fairness. And for a good RPG, meaning role-playing game, the fun is in, you make a choice, it's kind of a dick move, you get spanked, all right, I deserve it. Or you make a noble choice, you're punished for it by the world, but the narrative is very satisfying. And you go, all right, that made me feel more heroic because there was a cost. That's the sweet spot for role-playing game. Again, a game in which you role-play, as opposed to loot and leveling, which, I don't know, Elden Ring is probably an example of that. That is straight up loot and leveling and just environmental storytelling. Figure it out. If it doesn't make sense, who cares? Just kill the monsters, right? But you're making so many choices into voids because of the intent. What seems to be an intent of a fuck around and find out factor, a la Sandbox in Baldur's Gate 3. And my issue again, if Baldur's Gate 3 was half as long and designed to be played through again and again and again without exhaustion from the sheer amount of shit you have to do each time through, I think it would have been a stronger product. But then, you can't have somebody, it's so long, it's such good value. More and more I've become a quality over quantity player. I bought the steel case of Ghost of Tsushima. I did everything, farted around, wandered around. I spent about 50 hours in it. That was more satisfying, and I want to go back and play it again. That was a more than full price game because it was a steel case, right? It was premium price. I regret nothing. I love every penny I spent on that game. And it was only 50 hours. Whereas I've put, it's about 160 when I lop off my early access play, about 160, 170 hours into Baldur's Gate 3, but only 60 of those did I feel really engaged. Everything else was running around, getting lost in the maps, trying to find out where the fuck I'm supposed to go for this fucking quest, because a whole bunch of this stuff, I don't know what I'm doing. None of it feels meaningful. None of it feels informed. And then, you get into the Dark Urge stuff. It's like, okay, I know exactly what I'm doing in every moment. And it's cool to have the option to try to conceal it from your party. And that was another one where, and this is the point, these moments are great. But it's like these moments are accidents in Baldur's Gate 3 instead of the design directive, because those points where my character tells me what they're going to be this playthrough instead of what I determined for them are really great. Because there's a point there's a pretty shocking point in the Dark Urge thing where my half-orc priest of Mistra goes from trying to hide the Dark Urge and control it to telling absolutely everybody he possibly can, because, he's a good person who does bad things, and he wants everyone in the party to know that this is going on, because holy shit. And it's still, playing the core of the character, but the way I strategize that playthrough changed because I was playing the ball where it lies. Now, that and those in-character choices, I find more fun than the binary, well, this is going to change the plot things. And, I mean, I like those change the plot, but they're just not... The Act 1 binary choice, you have to be playing evil intent. And I guess that's fine, It's just I would have preferred a little bit more Terran Logain seasoning on the evil choice. Because then I have a reason to play evil. Because I just, I get to the druids and it's like these people are kind of shitty and selfish. And then, the goblins are eating dwarves and torturing adorable animals and torturing people. And the torturing people bothered me a lot less than torturing the animal, And I just can't. There's a lack of finesse with the presentation of evil in games now. And you get into some of the other characters in Baldur's Gate who could have been really good if there was more time. And that cat and mouse game, wow, that was so Canadian, mouse game. But that would have been more satisfying than all the other stuff in the way. But because they were lots of content, have the experience you want, absolutely everything got diluted. And it's been very educational to play, because I'm like, okay, I'm making a turn-based RPG. What kind of experience do I want people to have? And to me, the most satisfying thing, the thing that people talk about in the discussions of the game, are often the characters. And that, people think, oh, well, that means you give them a ton of narrative. A character-driven story is not a narrative-driven story. You do less hardcore campaigning and more moments where the characters interact with each other. There are some really great moments just walking around. They're kind of glitchy, so you miss some of them, but the characters talk to each other. And some of it's like, bland. But there are some cool character moments you get just in those little exchanges with people in the party. And I know that this is not the first game to do it, but doing something well, you don't have to be original if you execute well. And I really do think the game suffers just because of the sprawl, but also because, unlike The Witcher 3, where it had a very, very clear action RPG design directive and there was just so much open world content, it's one of the most satisfying open world games I've ever played. That and like Far Cry 3 and 4. Though Far Cry 3 kind of falls off once Vast dies. But, very, very satisfying game because it controlled some of the character variables. And there weren't, 6 to 8 love interests. There was Triss, Yennefer, and some flings. That's it. So choice paralysis is real. Making choices is only fun if it's not exhausting. And unlike a a tabletop RPG where doing anything the fuck you want is the point. You've got a GM there in real time adapting to the decisions the players make. I do think that video game role playing is more satisfying when the variables are restricted enough that the choices are manageable. It's not fun to feel overwhelmed by decision making. Too much like real life for me. And I mean, I do think it's a testament to Larian that they made a game ambitious enough that we can have this conversation. So hats off to them. And I'll leave there. There will be more discussion about Baldur's Gate 3 because it's kind of fun. I have a chance to do gaming content. Yay, there wasn't anything I was passionate enough for the longest time. So if you like this, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for some of you who can't afford it, coffee.com/LeannaK, or fund our Discord. Join our Discord by giving validated UR person through any of these methods. And thanks for watching.